Ura je čas, imamo še en vsebinski sklop, tudi zelo bogat, zelo zanimiv. Miro, so kakšne tehnična obvestila, kaj takega ni, prav vse je v redu. Končali bomo po programu. Zadnji sklop začenja. I will try to read carefully. Cristina Garcia Pozuelo Sanchez.
Perfect. Perfect. That's really good.
Sanchez or Sanchez?
Sanchez.
Sanchez. Oh,
Yeah.
Sanchez. Thank you. It's a promising address, the life of an ebook, življenje elektronskih knjig. Kristina prihaja iz Taylor and Francis firme. Kristina, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Yes, so thank you everyone for staying. I know it's the end of the day, but we're almost there. We're almost there. It's been fantastic for some of us 3 days, so a whole week, and for some of you 1 day, so thank you very much. So as here the colleague was saying, my name is Christina. I've just put my last surname because it's easier, and in England is what normally happens. So I work for Taylor and Francis in the UK, and what happens is we always say the last part of anything that is, doesn't matter if it's a long surname, so, but yeah, it's a bit longer in Spain. And I'm really pleased that I was invited actually to talk, because although all your talks have been mainly about open access, I'm also going to touch open access, but I wanted to talk to you about ebooks. So, right, let me see if I do this. Right, so what we wanted to, from Taylor and Francis ebook department, what we wanted to sort of like cover with you is just to really go down to the basics about ebooks, what librarians like about ebooks, what users like, what they think, what they find is better, not so better, not so good, and also to share with you a few maps about how the usage around the world is divided. We can talk about how all ebooks are not always new books as well, and the future of monographs and also OA. So we do love our ebooks, and we do love our books. That's the first thing I think everyone thinks. When you have a book, you own it, you want to have it with you all the time. There was, back in the 19th century, there was an English author, and he was called Martin Tapa, and he said a good book is the best of friends, the same today and forever. And that's the truth. Books are friendly, they're familiar, they're lovable. When you have it, you look at the front, you know how it is, you know the size, you keep it with you in your library, in your living room, you do your marks. So it's taken us a long time to get used to the fact of now the physicality of it is disappearing more towards sort of the ebook perception of it. Maybe not so much with journals or like just a magazine where you can think you don't get so attached, but an ebook you do get attached. But obviously with the new electronic portable sort of devices, these things are changing. So what is an ebook? Basically, the official meaning would be an electronic version of a print book which can be read on a computer or a specifically designed handheld device. But there is much more than this. Obviously, E, meaning electronic, is what takes us the physicality, but at the same time is giving us amazing possibilities. So it's a way to deal with our data in a tremendous way. What we have now is instantaneous, and we can find words and sentences in a whole book quicker than before. We can add comments, we can add ideas as well. We can highlight, we can find synonyms or meanings straight away on the internet. We can read anywhere at night if we wanted to. We didn't want to put the light on. So there's a few good things about ebooks. But it's also good to mention what's the difference between an academic ebook and maybe like an e-novel, because that's what people maybe find difficult to switch. An ebook, maybe we could say, is more a book that we can use in an academic context. So it would be a monograph or a reference that is used academically. An e-novel could be a fiction. So I always talk about Harry Potter, for instance. So obviously everyone wants to have the copy. But with reference, with academic, we don't get so attached to those titles. So it makes more sense to have maybe a bigger option, a bigger sort of like pool of books to search from. Obviously, although I'm saying this, the ebook use has increased at 33% in 4 years. So obviously, there is. I'm talking about the academic ebook as well. So obviously, there is some so things are getting better in that sense of like separating the novel from the academic book. And an interesting thing to say is that the main device is the personal computer, so people still want to use a computer to read an ebook, although we could read it everywhere on a. Again, I'm talking about the ebook as in academic ebook, so people still prefer a computer. I guess the size is still sort of important. And what do librarians like about ebooks is the use. I mean, I'm not going to say anything new to you here, but the usage and denials is straight away. We can just work it, we can work out fantastically quick what are the best books and which ones are not being used at all. It's instantaneous, like we said before. We can have bonus and extra materials, links, updates. topics, that we can get the topic straight away, what will be the next thing to read, for instance, if we've read something already. There is no packaging, there's no shipping expenses either. You can still print an ebook if you so wish, especially if they were DRM free, you can print the book. You can obviously use the book, so the book can be used for many people at the same time, so simultaneous users. And something very important, and I always mention this, because I used to be a teacher, and the fonts can be resized for the impaired, so not everyone can read a small print, not everyone can read with a white background, so this is really good to make the changes, so everyone has access to the information. I've just put together a few kind of informations about how the ebooks are seen around the world, and this is one thing that it covers for everyone, and it's the main ebook categories found in an academic library. Obviously, reference and monographs are going to be very well off, and then the rest, classic literature is getting there, it's going up, but not so much, and fiction, obviously in an academic library we might not find, but it's interesting to see that anyway it's not really so searched, or people don't want to have, although Kindle is quite used, this is not so much. And main subjects are business education and psychology, and I guess this is normal just because HSS will always be more seen as using books than maybe medicine and engineering, which are lower in the list, although they are quite high. So I guess medicine, of course, people will still prefer to have access to journals, to articles straight away. Something is being found, and this is what it is, instead of waiting for a whole book to be produced in one subject, which it comes more far in between. The DRM-free business, in my opinion, and I think you will all agree with me, DRM-free is the best option for everyone. That means, obviously, the digital right management will not offer any constraint if you had DRM-free. So you can print, you can copy, you can do everything. This involves a kind of encryption. So if you unencrypt it, then you can have free access. So I think libraries should really aim to have this. So we're talking about open access, and DRM-free is almost like the open access in a subscription, if you see what I mean. It's open for everyone to use it. So yeah, normally when you buy directly through a publisher, you should get DRM-free books, and then you can just use them. So a few maps, as I promised before. This is just to have an idea of the biggest number of books that are published per year. So China's number one, then it's the United States, and then the United Kingdom. I don't know if you can see, it's not that clear, but you can have like a kind of an idea. And I also added, well, just to point out that China has, is it twice as many as in the UK? But I'm going to show you the Europe map. So there you go. So it's 184 for the UK, for instance, and for China was 4,040. So yeah, Slovenia, although it doesn't seem to have appeared, I know it was 4,430 books published, and from that there were around 3,600 first editions and then a few reprints. So you can see how it's divided, just to have an idea. So it's quite a fair amount of books, but many of you might think, well, that's not as many as I thought.
Are you talking about printed books?
Yeah, I'm talking about, so books that are published, whether it is in ebook format or print format. Yeah. Now, there was some studies to see which countries expected to do better or to sort of develop their ebook vision. And I don't know if you can actually read all the countries at the bottom, but the idea is basically that the Nordics and the Benelux tend to be quite high. Germany and Switzerland as well. Austria, for instance, is lower, so it's a bit more conservative. For whatever reason, they're still not quite maybe 100% happy with everything that the ebooks offer for the academic world. So, yeah, so then obviously UK and the US, they tend to also do well. And this is a kind of like a fancy bar sort of system, but I think you can see, you can understand the point. So it's the main reasons against ebooks. And this is interesting for those of you who are librarians, just to see what you think users would think about this. So the main reason given, which is the second blue from the top, is I don't own an e-reader, which again I think is this kind of thinking about I would not be able to read this ebook. I still prefer the print. I still prefer to hold it with my hands because I know for sure it's there. So there's maybe a resistance to understand that you can read from everywhere. Preferring a print book is still high, but if you see what I'm trying to say, it's more the fact that they think that they're not going to be able to read it and they're actually preferring the print book. So maybe there is something to be aware there. I mean, pricing, for example, the too expensive, which is the third sort of color from the bottom, is fairly similar everywhere. Switzerland doesn't seem to complain too much about the price, but otherwise everyone else, and then India maybe will complain a little bit more, but then the rest, they don't seem to think that that is a problem. Yeah, so just to have sort of like an idea. Oh yeah, the other thing to mention is mainly the Nordics again, they will say interesting titles are not available. So again, maybe to think, what do the users need? Is there something that is missing? Is there something that we're not publishing that maybe we should? Okay, so benefits. What people thought that was the best thing? Well, the fact that it's interactive, the fact that it's enhanced experience, that's what everyone is going to like. That's the basic. I mean, I'm not saying anything new really to you, but it's good to really think about these things. Access to more content, so more ideas. What should I read next? Maybe a single platform for ebooks and journals as well, everything together. So as I said before, I work for Taylor & Francis, so that's something that we're working on, just to have a platform with everything together. No damage of the books. I guess librarians will like that. And yeah, the rest is just the budget. Again, it comes quite down, so that's not a problem. Like I was saying before, not all ebooks are new books, which means that anything that is published now can easily be an ebook, because everything is now an ebook. Before, it is a print book, everything. But some works, they have interactivity to it, so maybe encyclopedias, or maybe sort of like databases. So that is not as easy as it looks like. We need to have a platform that will accept this interactivity. But this is something that is not as easy as it looks like, but it can be done. Now, old books, sometimes they need a bit more time. And sometimes we don't have the rights. Sometimes we have an old contact or contracts. They don't want to, the author, we don't know what it is. So we need to prioritize as well. It takes time. So it's good to know from the users which books are being sort of missing in the e-world to maybe go about it. But in general, more authors are delighted because it's selling their books. So it's like we were saying before, working together with the authors, working together with the libraries to just find out what's the best thing and how can we make a better experience. What's the future of monographs then? Because maybe some of you think, but I don't want to give up my print books. Well, the truth is, I don't think anyone has to give up anything. I think there is advantages to the ebook, and there's advantages to books as well. As long as the readers prefer one or the other, the demand would just make it happen. So, yeah, we tend to always be flexible for that. But in my personal opinion, I think the e-world will always just go forward and forward. There's not much I can say about OA in books, as you probably can imagine. It was interesting this week listening to some of the presentations from the colleagues here, and Paul and other colleagues. So open access, obviously, for us as a publisher, is one of the most important developments in scholarly publishing, that is for sure. And we're really keen to work to make this make this happen. I think we do have an OA policy, but it's just the cost of producing a book, as you can also imagine, is quite high compared to a journal. We are thinking about, or well, it's already in place to work with chapters, so to make chapters open access, and then that would be a start. Not all the authors want to publish in open access. I think it needs some work. It needs for the authors to understand. That's why it's so important, these talks this week, because they need to understand all the benefits. I think some authors will still think, well, I want my book to be published in the old traditional way. Maybe with journals it's sometimes easier for them to understand. They will get through quicker. So yeah, that's something that will Taylor and Francis for sure, and I guess all the publishers were happy to know how to make this better and how to work towards it. So that's really everything I could just in a really quick nutshell. And if you've got any questions, obviously feel free to ask me. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, Christine.
Thank you.
We'll have questions at the end of it will be enough time. Okay. Also, I have one question for you. Okay. Naslednji, evo, to pride potem z očali, očala. Tako. Mikrofon je vključen. Bliže ga moram prinesti. Naslednji referent prihaja iz Univerze v Barceloni, Ignasi, Labastida in Juan. Prihaja iz Univerze v Barceloni in njegov prispevek ima v bistvu en tak izzivalen naslov, mislim tak challenging naslov. Is my university ready for the open science challenges? To verjetno Mojca, če je še tle, se tudi na naši univerzi sprašujemo, če smo že za to pripravljeni in usposobljeni. Sicer je pa dr. Ignasi zaposlen v Centru za podporo izobraževanju in raziskovalni dejavnosti na Univerzi v Barceloni. Are any troubles with presentation?
Yeah, just a moment.
Oh, it will be.
No. Tomasz. What is the problem with...
Okay.
Okay. You're either something.
No, but...
Wait.
No, it doesn't want. Maybe. Wait. I will try this one now. Voila. Okay, and now? Perfect. Okay, so thank you very much. I'm not going to speak in Italian, although I could do something. Come va? Va bene. But buona tarda, good afternoon. I can speak Catalan, but I'm not going to do it either. For me, it's a pleasure to be here in Slovenia again, such an inspiring country for us, and a country with a lot of things to copy. And that's the idea. The idea of my talk is to show what we can copy from others, to show what we are doing in Barcelona at my university, but also to be like an inspiring talk for other people that is facing the same challenges that we face in Barcelona. I'm not going to give solutions. I'm just going to give some tips, some ideas, because I don't have the magic solution about all this challenge of the open science. But I would like to explain to you what we have done and probably to get some collaborations in the future. When we talk about open science, we sometimes see this kind of pictures. This is the full cycle of the research. This is a picture that was made by Jean-Claude Burgerman from the European Commission, showing that in every point of the research cycle, it can be a space for openness. During all the day, we have heard about open access, we have heard about citizen science. We'll hear a fantastic talk after me by Professor Wyler. We talk about data, etc. But as an institution, we saw this and say, well, how we start with that? There is a lot of things to do. Another way to see open science is to use this taxonomy made by Foster that was mentioned when Willem Wigmark from Liber explained different projects that were involved. This is one of the projects, Foster. Foster is aimed at training young researchers and researchers in general, and I know that Foster made some events here in Ljubljana. So when we see this open science taxonomy, again, we see a lot of things that we've been talking and a lot of things that we must face. So for instance, the Open Lab notebooks, open source, reproducibility, policies, open peer review, etc., etc. But also open science, from the point of view of an institution, can be seen as a global action, not just in research. We can also include open educational resources, because at the end, if our institution wants to be open, it has to be open in global, not just in science or in research. So here we include open source, open data, and when we put here open data, it's not just the research data, it's also the data that we produce as institution, the data, for instance, of our budgets, our staff, which are the figures of our students, etc. So it's important also to share all this kind of data, because there is a lot of people doing research about university organization. And there are some institutions, some universities that have already opened data portals, not on the way of the research data, but on the way of the open data as administrative data. So with all this challenge, with all these pictures, well, what I propose at my institution is to make a roadmap towards open science, a roadmap that includes all the different steps that I think we have to get prepared, not for the future, but for the present. First, we have to define what's that, what is open science. And I'm gonna share with you a couple of definitions, one that has already been mentioned by Dr. Iris. After we define open science, we have to identify in our institution which could be the areas to work in. We can find and match the same areas, but one institution can prioritize one or the other. One could say, okay, I'm going to focus more on open access, the other one on research data, etc. But we have to identify those areas if we want to establish our roadmap. Then we have to select the people who is going to work with us. The library cannot do that by itself. There is a lot of people within the institution, especially researchers, that you have to engage in this roadmap. You have to engage them in defining what we're going to do towards open science. Another important thing is to acknowledge all the work that has been done during these years. We were in Budapest, and we were all the time mentioning the declaration of the Open Access Initiative in Budapest. It's more than 15 years. So in 15 years, we have done a lot of things, and it's fair to acknowledge everything that we have done. One, we have the situation, the current situation. We have to plan the future. What we want to do, which will be our goals, which will be our milestones. And the important thing, and I was talking with a colleague outside, it's not enough to define a plan. It's not enough to plan actions. She was mentioning, oh, we have a beautiful plan of actions, but we are not monitoring the actions. We have to see if the actions are done or not, and if they are not done, why these actions are not done. And if we find solutions for this why they are not done, then we have to review and update our roadmap. So let's try to figure out how we can do this roadmap. We start with the definitions, and this definition is from the Commission. This definition is mainly addressed to what is the goal of open science. Open science has a goal of transforming science through ICT tools, networks, and media to make research more open, global, collaborative, creative, and closer to the society. And again, the society will appear. Why? Because the important thing in open science is to bring the society within the academy, within the institutions, but not just bring the people inside the institutions, to go out from the institutions. The researchers must go out of the institutions, must share everything they have outside our walls. The other definition that was the one that Dr. Ayres mentioned before is the definition in Wikipedia, the definition of open science as a movement. As a movement, as we had the open access movement or other movements of openness. And it's the same, to make scientific research, data, and dissemination accessible to all levels of the inquiring society. All levels, amateur and professional. It's not enough when researcher says, well, all my colleagues can access to my papers, all my colleagues can access to my data. But it's not enough. It's not just the colleagues, it's not just the elite of researchers, it's everyone who is fair to access to all research and all the outcomes of a research. And finally, when I always talk about open, I want to stress the definition of open. Open is not just free access, it's more than free. And here is the open definition that stresses the idea of you must allow free access, but you must allow reusability. The idea is that open means free access and reuse. So when you put the adjective, you put the tag of open, you have to know that you are not just opening and allowing people to use, you are allowing to reuse and to make things out of your content. Okay, we have the definitions, so now we can identify some working areas. And looking at the initial infographies, the initial taxonomies, etc., we have all clear working areas where we can start working. Publications, open access, there's been a lot of talks about open access, research data, but also other kind of research output. It's not enough to talk about publications and data. We have methodologies, we have code, and we have other things that cannot be exactly classified in a word. But for instance, citizen science, there are a lot of events that has to be also discussed how we acknowledge the work and the impact that those events are having for researchers and for society. The social impact, and when I say social impact, I'm not just saying how many tweets or how many Facebook or how many impacts has got research in one of these scientific social networks. It's also the impact on the society. There are researchers that do research, and the outcomes of that research changes regulations, change laws, change behaviors, and that's the social impact that is interesting to measure. In Barcelona, we have a group that it was mentioning, I think when Nicolo showed one of the articles. So these people there are measuring the social impact. They have an open repository for social impact. It's called SIOR. And what they're doing, they are gathering evidences of these changes. They are not gathering tweets or Almetrics or these things. They are gathering how a research has changed in society. Another important thing is the evaluation. I think it's the key issue when we are trying to do something on open science. If we don't change the way we assess or evaluate research, we will fail towards open science. We have to think about the infrastructures. If we have new ways of doing research, we need new ways of putting that research. We need new infrastructures. It doesn't mean that we have to build everything new. Sometimes what it means is that we have to connect our infrastructures with other infrastructures that are outside. And maybe we have to make new common infrastructures that usually is much better than make a small own infrastructure. We have to make new policies. It's not enough to talk and talk and talk. We need actions. We need support from the legislative power, not just at the government level, but also at the university level. And we have to go beyond science and research. As I mentioned before, I think that if an institution like a university wants to go towards open science, it doesn't have to forget other openness in the institution. We have to work with and for the people. And that's the part of the selecting the people. I think that we have to acknowledge all the leaderships that we have in our institutions. Sure, you have some researchers doing excellent things in open access, excellent things in citizen science, excellent things in research data management. We have to gather all these people and put it together to work on this roadmap to the future. The new behaviors, we have to acknowledge these young researchers that they do different things in the lab. They they communicate to each other in a different way. Well, we don't have to ban them. We have to promote them, to foster these new behaviors, and to find a way to reward these new behaviors. We have to build these new communities and sharing best practices. When I say communities, it means communities within the institutions, but also between institutions, to check what they're doing in Austria, what they're doing in Hungary, what they're doing in Croatia, etc. We will learn a lot by copying and acknowledging that we are copying. We have to reward these new outputs, these new methodologies. There are a lot of reward, a lot of new methodologies that I don't know how to reward it now. They don't have impact factor. They don't have citations, but they have a lot of impact in society, so we have to reward them. We have to train, and it's sessions like this one, we train, we explain, but we have to train at all levels at the university, starting with the young researchers, the PhD students, and sometimes undergraduate students. You can start with them to explain them that there is a new way of doing research and that you will support that new way. Because if you don't tell them that you're going to support that, they will look at the other side. We have to change the mindsets. We are in 2017. We are doing new things. We have new tools. We have to change the way we work before. And we have to engage citizens. If we want to work for the people and with the people, we have to engage citizens within the institution, and we have to go out and work with the citizens. So if we have a look on what has been done, I used the easiest one, the publications. We can check in our own institution, okay, on publications, do a little bit what Colleen was proposing before. How is the level of my institutional repository? Which is my percentage of open access? How much green open access I have? How much gold open access I have? How much it cost? It has cost me a lot. I pay the fund, I pay the APCs. Is somebody else paying? I can make a picture of this in my institution. I need the picture because then I could make the goals and the milestones that I want to do for the future. If I have institutional journals supported by my own institution, in Barcelona we have more than 60, I can measure how open these journals are. Most of the journals could be open access, could use some of the CC license, but other journals, maybe they have chosen a different model. But for instance, is your journal that is not using the open access model clear on the green road? There are a lot of journals that don't say a word about the green road. So what we should do is to look at our journals in our institution and at least ask them to be clear about the green open access. And finally, if you have a university press, if you want to see and you want to change, as for instance the example that Paul Iris was showing to us before, well, we have to think now, what is our situation in relation to openness? I have done any experiment, I have a book or a chapter, or, okay, think about your own institution and your own press as you have it. In infrastructures, we can do the same. We can think about how is our repository, how is connected with other repositories. For instance, OpenAir. Is my repository ready now for data, for code, for other outcomes of research? What about research data management? Which are the facilities that I give to my researchers? Can I give them just a repository, or can I give them more tools for that? And what about digital humanities? Do we have groups discussing the different needs of digital humanities? They are sometimes different than labs or other facilities that the life science need. And of course, how all those facilities are connected, not just nationally, but also internationally. And we have to analyze the cost of all of that and the services. Which services are around all those facilities? Sometimes you say to the researcher, well, here you have a terabyte, do whatever you want. Well, this is the picture. Maybe in the future we want to build services around. Maybe this idea of the data stewards could be a good idea to work towards the future. And to analyze the future, we have to analyze those future scenarios. The scenarios that it seems that they are close, so it's time to start thinking about them. First, the famous scenario of 2020. It seems far. but in a month it will be 2018. So it's talking about 2 years. Well, are we ready to achieve this 100% of open access in publications? What about those offsetting models, what Colleen was mentioning to you before? Are we ready to make to analyze the future scenario within my institution? These new publishing platforms, those platforms that a year ago launched Wellcome Trust, the Open Research, or the Bill and Melinda Gates are launching in next year, or the Commission is offering to launch in next year, to publish, not in journals, but in those platforms. And what about this European Open Science Cloud? Are we ready to get connected in this infrastructure, this cloud, whatever it is in the future? So we have to ask a lot of questions ourselves. How much do we spend in publications? How much do we spend in publishing? And not just in publishing open access, publishing also closed access, because there are still journals where you have to pay and the journal is closed. So we have to take economically a list of all those expenses and make the picture. And how many articles do we produce every year? And it's not enough to say, well, I have thousands of articles, I'm a good producer of articles. No, we have to think about how many of those articles are our corresponding authors, how many of those articles, for instance, are proportionally ours. If I have an article with 5 authors and only one from my institution, it's mine. Or I could say that only 20% of the article is mine. It's another way of counting the production of the articles. For instance, the University of Leiden is doing that kind of calculus. I'm ready for the new publishing platforms. I'm ready to change my evaluation. If I publish in these publishing platforms, my institution will count that article the same that is I have in Nature or Science or whatever Applause, whatever journal I have. Because maybe that article will have more impact to the society, will have more citations than in another journal. So I have to be ready, my institution has to be ready to evaluate this kind of publications. And what about the reviewers? In those platforms will have names of the reviewers. It will be an open peer review. So maybe we'll have to find out ways of rewarding, of acknowledge the reviewers that until now we haven't. And as I said before, we have to be ready for this European Open Science Cloud. Next week, we have a meeting in Brussels to discuss about that. How we as institutions could be present in the European Open Science Cloud. If we are not ready to be there, we will not exist at the European level. And it will be a pity for our researchers and for our contents. So let's start making a plan. If we have all the picture, we have the people, we have the definitions, we can make a plan. And we don't have to start by scratch, we don't have to start from zero. We can copy again. And I like to copy if the things I copy, I think they are good. And I copy from Amsterdam, from the Dutch presidency in 2016, when they made a meeting in April, and they gathered a lot of people to discuss about the future. And not to discuss just theoretically, but to discuss actions. And in this document, we have a call for action. There are 12 actions that, as institutions, we can collaborate, we can work with them. The idea is to have 2 goals. The 2 goals are full open access for all scientific publications. Well, it's a goal that appeared in Budapest 2002. And a new approach towards the optimal use of research data. And what do we need? We need 2 things, 2 important things: the new assessment, the new rewards, the new evaluation systems, and the alignment of policies. It doesn't make sense that we have policies to one side and the other policies going to the other side. And to exchange the best practices, not just within institutions, within researchers, within libraries, etc., all the stakeholders. The 12 actions are those ones are grouped in 5 big groups. The first group is to remove barriers. Of course, if we identify barriers to work towards open science, the first thing we have to do is to remove those barriers. We have to change the evaluation. We have to facilitate text and data mining. That's one of the topics on the copyright reform that we have in discussion at the European level. We have to improve the insight into the intellectual property rights and the issues as privacy. Is all the times when you approach researchers, is the first thing they do, oh, because my data, careful, because there are privacy, etc. Well, let's be clear in that, please. Create transparency on the cost of publications. We will repeat that, I don't know how many times during the day. We have to develop new infrastructures. We talked before about the FAIR. We need these common infrastructures. We need to create incentive for open science. At the end, we need to create incentive for science in general, because at the end, we're talking today about open science, but I hope that in 10 years, or maybe in 5 years, we will talk about science as we did before. We have to adopt these open access principles. We have to stimulate these new publishing models. We have to stimulate this evidence-based research. We have to promote all the open science policy and involve researchers and new users in this new way of doing science. And of course, encourage all the stakeholders into discussion. We cannot just discuss ourselves. We have to bring all the agents together. And these 12 points can be summarized in points that are specifically addressed to universities, to research performance institutions. And there are the points that are addressed to us, that they call to us, and they say, okay, what we can do as institution. We can explore these new ways of evaluating research. Come on, let's do it. It's not just a theory. We can start thinking about changing that. We can retain control over research outputs. We can assert our copyright. It doesn't mean that now researchers will never have copyright. No, we can find out some models, some balancing models, and we can get copyright for all of us. We can share by default and close when it's needed. I always say that I hope one day people will ask me, why did you close that? Until now they ask me, why did you open that? We have to negotiate with the stakeholders these ideas, these principles of open access. We have to be transparent, especially I work at a public institution. I think this is key. We have to be transparent. We have to tell the people how much and where do we spend our money, that in fact is not our, it's their money. We have to have these institutional policies in open science in general. We have a policy on copyright, a policy on research data management, in evaluation, etc., etc. We have to set up those infrastructures and engage with the existing ones and share openly all the citizen science project. It's one of the critiques that I address to my colleagues when they do citizen science projects. They use a lot the citizens to gather a lot of data. They ask citizens, oh, engage with us, will you participate, etc. When they gather all the data, they don't share the data. And I think this is not fair. We have to share the data with the citizens. We have to give them back all this production. So, with all that, we decided at the University of Barcelona to act, to do things. So we decided to identify at least 5 areas. We're still discussing if we could have a 6. We have merged of some of these areas, but the idea is to have 5 areas, 5 clear areas that we think that we can start working. One, an easy one. It's not easy, but it's a clear one. Open access. We have been doing that for a lot of years already. Second one, research data management. Why? Because it's a need. We have this policy coming from Europe about research data, about the FAIR, about the Horizon 2020. We have some projects, so it's a need that we have to give an answer to our researchers. We have to change the evaluation. We have to start exploring new ways of changing. It's difficult because the universities usually are a conservative institution. And sometimes when you say, okay, let's change the way we evaluate people, they will tell you, what will happen if now someone passed the evaluation and if we change the method, they don't pass the evaluation? Well, maybe it's not fair that they were passing the evaluation now. So maybe it's time to change. Another area, an important area, is training, training, and training. Training researchers, training staff, training rectors, training everyone. Everyone has to change the way we work today. And the public engagement. We already have some events, some fairs that we engage with the people. We want to do that, and we want to continue to do that, but also to work together with those researchers that are doing citizen science and to find a way to include those public engagement in the evaluation, in the research data, etc., etc. So what we did is we create a steering committee with the vice rectors that are involved mainly in these areas. Also, I think the steering committee should be on the top the rector, and that's my idea, that one day the rector will say, yes, I will be the president of that, and I will have as a strategy, as other universities have done, the main strategy of the university is openness. Well, meanwhile, we have the research, we have the doctoral studies, and we have, before Moika mentioned, the transformation, the digital transformation vice-rectorate, that it's key also for the future. We need to transform our institution in a digital way. And we, after we have this steering committee, we have these 5 dedicated committees of all of these areas. And we work together, and we will establish for 2018 all these different actions. Actions that has to be realistic. We cannot change the evaluation from now for tomorrow, but we can start doing some steps toward the future. And if we fail, because probably we will fail in some of those actions, we can learn of failure, and we can review the actions and make new actions, because at first time, it's not always perfect. You always fail. So if we took one area, like open access, what we did is we made the picture. The picture is we have an institutional open access policy since 2011, but we failed with the policy. We only have a few percentage of papers in our institutional repository. The most success collection is from 2016, where we almost reached the 20% of the papers. So we have to do that with that. We have our institutional repository linked to our current research information system, called CRIS. That's a success. Researchers are easily connected to the repository. They don't have to spend a lot of time uploading the papers in the repository. They spend more time in ResearchGate or in academia. So I always say, test it, and you'll see that in a few minutes, your paper will be in the institutional repository. We have funds for open access publishing, and from the beginning, 2010, we have excluded hybrid. We think that is not the system. I think Miro just mentioned it before. And all the funds, all the APCs that we have paid are published, not just in our institutional repository, but also in the Open APC, the project from OA Impact. We have open access at institutional journals. I could say that all the electronic, all the digital journals that we have in our platform are open access. They have a CC license, mostly CC BY. Some they have other restrictions, but the majority have a CC BY. And we have a few open experiences in the University Press. We have a University Press, and finally, we start to have some collections, some books using Creative Commons license. So from this point, we plan some actions for the future, for the next year. First, to review the institutional open access policy. Does it make sense to have a policy if nobody monitors that policy? It's a failure if you just make a policy and you don't ask the people to fulfill with the policy. So what we're going to do is to change the policy towards assessing what is in the institutional repository. Our colleagues of the Catalan Technical University have done that, and they are up to 90% of the papers in the repository. The idea is that if your paper, your output is not in the repository, it doesn't count in our internal evaluation. We want to expand the open access principles in new collections in the University Press. We already have 2 more collections that will be fully open in the University Press. I always use the example of UCL to show my University Press that an open University Press is possible and is feasible. We want to publish the full picture of all our publications cost, not just what we pay for the resources, but also what we are paying on APCs. Probably the most challenging for that, and we are working with our colleagues, is to show how much we pay through the European projects, because we don't pay as university, we don't pay directly. It's paid by another foundation that we have, and we have to figure out how much money are we putting in the system. And here there will appear hybrid, there will appear different things. We're also using other tools, like for instance OA, DOI, to see how much hybrid are we paying, or potentially paying, since those papers are authored by one of our researchers. We want to calculate these offsetting scenarios. We want to make a little bit what Colin was mentioning, to see what will happen if we put an hypothetical APC in our production. We will pay more, less, the same. And finally, to include in any negotiation, the open access principles. It's not enough to say big deal, no. Let's talk about open access, how we're gonna switch and how we're gonna make the transition. We have other plans. We have other plans not just in open access. We have planned actions also in establishing this research data management policy based in a project funded by the Commission, the LEARN project, which I was working there with Paul Iris and other colleagues from Vienna, from Liber, and from Chile. The LEARN project has a fantastic model for research data management, and what we did in Barcelona, I think Paul showed the picture before, is to gather all the Catalan universities and adapt that model to our needs. It's a model that can be adaptable, and maybe in Slovenia you can do the same, changing a little bit the needs that you have in your institutions. We want to introduce these new research outcomes to make more open the way you can say, I did that, I did the other, beyond publications or data. We want to review, and we are doing this right now, all the current internal evaluation. We want to get rid of the impact factor. Until now, it was very easy. We just click one button, and it says where you have published, not what did you publish. And we want to acknowledge and reward all those citizen science projects. We have quite a few projects within our institutions, and they are claiming we want some reward, we want some knowledge, we want that when you do the evaluation, it will count for the future and for our career. And finally, we have a plan to train at all university levels. We have been doing that for many ages, but we are now going to put the open science stack. We plan for 2018 to have a course of 4-6 hours for PhD students. It would be not a mandatory course because it seems that we cannot put it mandatory, but it will be more than recommended. We will hope that the majority of our students will pass through that course and they will learn how to do things in the open science sphere. So, let's be open. Let's try to be as open as possible. And here to finish, to conclude, I would like to show you the idea that had, in 2008, a group of students in Berkeley University. They made another declaration, the Wyler Declaration. They put that name because the room was called the Wyler Room. And what after discussions, they made that declaration. A declaration on a blackboard. It's also available digitally. But in the blackboard saying that for them, an open university should follow those 5 principles. The first principle, research in the university, the research that produces a university should be open access. That the course materials should be open educational resources. The university should choose free software when it was possible. That patents should be for public good. And finally, that public internet should not be censored. I think there are 5 good principles, and there are 5 principles that we can follow towards open science. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ignasi, for a really interesting and encouraging paper. We will discuss later about this. And still, we have one presenter, one paper. Spravi, še enega. A smo že utrujeni, nismo, ne? Še en zanimiv prispevek. Daniela Wylerja. Daniel prihaja iz Züricha, iz univerze v Zürichu. Če ste kdaj obiskali univerzitetno knjižnico v Zürichu, pa mogoče se ustavili še na tehniški univerzi, v Zürichu pa v njihovi knjižnici, potem ste videli, koliko dejansko vlagajo, kakšen pomen dajejo knjižnicam na univerzi v Zürichu. I told only that if somebody is going to Zürich, should stop in your university library or stop in Technische Universität and visit that library. You are really great.
They should visit me. Okay, it's of course a hopeless job to give the last talk, and organizers obviously wanted to punish me, but they didn't realize that they would punish the audience. So be careful what you're doing. I will, at the end, maybe if there's still someone left in the room, I will tell you a joke. Good. Good. Let me quickly say who I am and why I'm here. Because then you will understand a little bit why I do these things, and we can probably even shorten the talk. So I'm a theoretical particle physicist. I've in fact worked together with people from the Josef Stephan Institute here. I've been here before, and I'm very happy to be back here. Now, theoretical physics has always been open access. I'm very old now. I started my first paper in 1975, and that was immediately available as preprint, and everyone could see it. And since then, we have always had preprints. We had the archives later that are now well known. So I grew up scientifically in an environment of open access, and I was a little bit surprised when I entered all these discussions that this is not so everywhere. So for me, there's a picture that we eventually get to open access in the way physicists do it, and we should do this, but we should go beyond. Which should go to new aspects of open science, and one of them is citizen science, and that's why I like it. It also fits my belief that while we have clever people at universities, there are many more clever people outside that know things, that would like to contribute to science, and we should make use of that. Use in the sense that both sides will benefit, those and we. So that's my talk on citizen science. And let me quickly give a preview of what I'm planning to do. So I will give an introduction to citizen science, some comments. Of course, Tiberius did it already much better, but I tried to do it in a somewhat more emotional way. I will present some projects so you can see what citizen science actually can do for science. I will go to the issue of citizen science and universities, and last and maybe most important part is how universities enter this. So open science is the title of all these seminars. We know very much what we believe. Many people have different views. There are various aspects, open access, etc. This has all been said. So citizen science is one of them. And although I've been, in my last years, been working on several of these aspects, especially altmetrics, citizen science is now in the center of my talk. Now, what is citizen science? We heard it. It's the idea of involving actively, not just passively, actively non-professional scientists in the whole research project. So the idea, of course, it cannot be done in its pure form, that non-professionals enter the whole research project, say from asking the question to data gathering, to analysis, and to publishing. As said, citizen science is an integral part of open science, and there are many ways to do it. There are many opportunities, as I will show you, and the field is rapidly evolving. However, there are challenges. If you have a new research method, there are of course dangers and difficulties. Here they are, they're obvious. Many established scientists will ask you, yeah, but what you do about the quality of this research, it's probably not very good. And there are legal problems. How do you acknowledge a citizen if he has contributed a lot to a paper? Is he an author, or do you acknowledge him or give him some money or anything? So these are issues that have to be dealt with. Now, citizen science is obviously high on the agenda of the European Commission, which also means that they are ready to give some money. And that, of course, should make it more interesting. So some statement that I took from one of these web pages, citizen science they view as the core of open science, is the gist of open science. I would say I partially agree with it, not entirely, or we should say citizen science is one of the possibilities of open science. So they believe that the Commission should facilitate projects by technical support, regulatory framework. What's not written here that they should give money. But that's of course what we really expect from them. Now, citizen science, what is it? There are many things called citizen science. For us here, the main interest, but that's not the only one, is on academic projects, that we would say projects in which universities, professionals work together with citizens. But there are many different ones. There are activists projects, could be people who care more about the environment. There are many of those that some have led to interesting and important results, have convinced politicians to change their direction. There are governments that start citizen science projects. In Holland, one of the projects was to ask citizens what research they wanted. Then there are these associations, platforms, how to do citizen science, and all kinds of projects. So there's a variety, everyone has another idea. For me, the academic projects are in the center also of today's talk. I found a nice description of citizen science in a web page of SciStarter. This is a platform that allows you to do citizen science projects, and the main emphasis you can read that the citizen science project, it's the gist is that anyone can participate. Participants use the same protocol. It's an important technical issue. Data can help real scientists. So the question that should be asked should be a relevant question, and a wide community of scientists and citizens work together. Now, this, you might argue that why should citizens actually have a right to do science? And for this you can go back to an old, to the Declaration of Human Rights, in which it was said that in Article 27, citizens have the right to participate in cultural life. And in fact, this was made more precise in 1952 in a protocol that I found of UNESCO, in which there was actually mentioned that citizens can contribute not just by reading the projects, but by designing them. And this is somehow the line that is followed nowadays. Okay, let me come to projects so you can see what I mean. It's a little bit less theoretic. I've chosen projects that are well known. I've quickly tried to find a project that would involve Slovenian people and researchers. I found one, but I didn't bring it in my head. I didn't understand everything. So I will stay with some normal, standard projects that I know very well, but there are others. Now, the best known one is one called Galaxy Zoo. Galaxy Zoo is a collection of pictures taken by satellite, by high-tech telescope, and they take pictures of galaxies. Now, the whole sky is not only full of stars, but it's full of galaxies. And if you have the right instrument, there are galaxies all over. And people try to look at them, to classify them, to see whether they are round or elliptic or whatever, and to learn how galaxies form by looking at the different stages. Now, the pictures, you don't just see a wonderful galaxy and then you see nothing else and then you say, this is it. In fact, there are other objects in the sky which are in the foreground that make the galaxy invisible, they hide them, or just are other objects. And the picture that has become well known is this one. The picture shows a galaxy, and then it shows another object, the green object. And computer analysis is just is at loss here. They see it's, we don't know what it is. Is it a galaxy? Is it something else? And so such pictures cannot be analyzed today by computers. And it was then a Dutch school teacher who saw this for the first time, looked at it, and started a whole research into such objects. And we know now that there's a small gas cloud that's in front of the galaxy, and the light it emits originates from the radiation it receives from the galaxy. So a citizen saw an unusual picture. She could kind of narrow it down, and then scientists, of course, they looked at it with bigger instruments, and they could assess what it is. So this is where citizens can have an important impact that say, astronomers don't see. Now, there are many projects in natural sciences. I show one project which is in the humanities and history. It's a project a little bit like the one that Tiberius showed today. It's let me show you what it is. They collected 500,000 records of marriage contracts in the Netherlands for over 300 years, and citizens deciphered them, digitized them, and understood them, and this helped the researchers to understand the social and economic situation in those years. So the interesting part to me in this context here is that this is a collaboration between researchers and big archives, and sometimes universities host big archives, and I could imagine that in many universities there are archives that should and could be looked at. I will look also at this project. This is Folded, another famous one. This is an attempt to understand how proteins fold. Now, proteins, chains of molecules, they fold according to the laws of physics or chemistry. So you put some molecules together and then they connect to each other by given laws. So there's a game, Folded is a game that you can put in pieces and then you can play the physics rules, and then it comes out as a structure. And this way citizens have found new structures that actually have led the way of understanding some of the HIV medication. So eventually, of course, we believe that such games can also be played by computers, by using artificial intelligence. And this is, I will come to this later. So another project which I will not go into is the Chintang language project, but let me finish with, the examples with this one. This is a project research on healthy aging. The idea here is that you involve the older people in the research, in which you try to find out what makes their life better, what do they need, what activities are most useful. So this is another clear example where pure academic research is not enough, and you need involved people to make it a worthwhile project. Now, how do citizen science project work at universities? Now, universities claim they have a high quality, so we would like to have citizen science project that satisfy academic standards. And here are some of the arguments that say why research can be better if you do citizen science. So citizen science can actually enlarge the range of your questions. It clearly supports technical advances. It is a basis for policy decisions. This has been argued before. And on the other hand, it enhances the public education. It helps universities find a justified place in society. And it is a chance for universities to profile themselves. So there's two sides to citizen science: science itself, but also the acceptance, the interest, the way people look at universities. Now, universities, why are they important? They bring things to science that no one else has. There are researchers there, so they know what research is. They have a highly motivated research faculty, students. They have libraries, they have technical labs, and so on. So they are in a good position to do good projects. And sometimes they are even respected in some countries, which enhances, of course, the acceptance of what they do. Now, I worked a little bit on this issue, what universities can do, should do, and this came out as a paper, a Lero paper on citizen science, in which we, with my co-author, François Gray, we defined certain issues that should be looked at, that are important, and how progress can be made on those. Here are some of the points that we have discovered and that are used nowadays: how to recruit people, how to gauge the quality of the research, the impact, that they should be open and transparent. And this is very important, openness and transparency. It comes back to what we heard before. You should, as a researcher, be open to the citizens on what you are doing with the data possibly even involve them, so citizens know for what they are working for and what is done with their research. It's how to organize and to communicate between researchers and citizens, how to reward them, and what are the legal and ethical issues. And this has resulted in recommendations that we make to scientists and to institutions. And I don't want to go and bore you too much with all of these, but there's one point that I think is important. A university that wants to profile itself as citizen science should have one single point of contact to the citizens. So it's visible to the citizens, and it can advertise it, and people will know if they want to do research, that's where they can go. And at this point, then researchers on the other side will also come in and explain their projects, and the contact will start. So there are many others that you see or you can read later, but this is one that I find is quite important in today's discussion. Now, here's a slide I want to, before I come to the libraries, show you what we believe the trends are. There is clearly an increasing coordination between different fields, so it becomes more multidisciplinary. It is clear that there will be project platforms, more and more points where citizen science can be done. We should enlarge the participation of citizens, so they are not just listeners to our results, but they take part in what we are doing. There will be connections established between different projects, more and more, and it's actually happening. And there's a technical future, machine learning, artificial intelligence. Citizen science will make this contact between machine and people possible and influence, in some sense, the machine learning process. Okay, so let me come to my last part involving libraries. Why do I believe libraries are important in citizen science? Let me also say I haven't been thinking of this at all up to months ago, when I realized I would have the chance to talk to people like you, and I started to think about what libraries can do, and this is the result. Now, before you answer what libraries can do, you know what there should be, what is needed for citizen science. So here is a list of issues: data curation, linking up with citizens, communication, expose books on citizen science, and particularly long-term repositories. So all these are needed for citizen science projects, and all these have in some way or another a connection to libraries. And depends on how the library is set within a university, within the community, they can contribute to some of these. Now, many libraries worldwide have started on this, and these are some examples that I show quickly on how libraries have been involved in citizen science. So, first one is a paper I've found and looked at where the authors immediately say that what are the opportunities. So I have read it quickly. It is, of course, what I said before. They recognize the opportunities. One example that I always like to show, it's a project that was started or is being done at UCL by Muki Haklai. he was approached by people surrounding UCL who were worried that when they build new buildings and they destroy the old ones, things like asbestos would come into the air and make things dangerous for them. So they found out that there is research on that, but it's not accessible to citizens exactly because it's not open. And so the library was put into a process to open these informations to citizens. So here the library could work on their own holdings to make it possible for citizens. Other example, UCLA, the library has a website where you can find citizen science projects. Similarly, at the University of Illinois, there are precise projects like here, the facilitating public participation GIS, another option for library. And the last project that I find quite interesting. This is in Arizona. The university library connects to smaller libraries in the communities and discusses with them, makes possible citizen science projects of these communities. And through the libraries, the contact is established. So there are many activities that libraries can do, and let me then come to conclusion. Citizen science, I believe, is quite a natural activity for libraries. It needs, what does it need? We need coordination with other units of a university, so a library should have connection or deep to the IT services, communication, community relations, other libraries of the universities or libraries outside, databases, archives. I know this sounds like a lot, but I've been wondering over the last years when I walked through the university library in Zürich, which is a traditional university, and the library space decreases almost daily. Libraries, everybody says we don't need the libraries, we look everything up on the internet, and then people need more office space, so the simplest thing to do is to eliminate library space. And you have probably discussed this many times. There seems to be a change in the activities of libraries, and I think the shift here to citizen science or other forms of science support might be a possibility. Now, citizen science activities would need more interaction of the libraries with researchers. It would help if libraries support the action for open access. And the simple thing to do is just buy books on citizen science. So I hope it hasn't been too boring for you. You're probably already asleep, so you can't even answer. Let me thank all of you that have stayed here. The joke that I want to tell you is there's a conference, and as the talks progress, more and more people leave. And then the second to last speaker has one in the audience. And then he asks, why are you still here? And then this guy says, I'm the last speaker. Thank you very much.
Professor Wyler, for your inspiring presentation. And now we have about 10 minutes, Miro. 10 minutes, 10 minut recimo, 10 minutes for questions. Izvoli Dr. Mali, Faculty for Social Sciences, University of Ljubljana.
I would ask a question to the last speakers. At first I'd like thanks to you. You have it not borrowed. So that was very interesting for me. And just a moment.
I hear you
Yeah. Because for me it's good that you illustrated this concept of open science. Because sometimes sound this term still like buzzword. I would say at least a lot of this general work we could remember in the history of policy discourse about, for instance, big science in 70s. All talked about this term, but nobody didn't know what does it mean. For that reason, thank you that you use good illustration. Now, what are the questions for me after your presentation, both of you? Two questions for me are very interesting, because by both of you there were presented is the role of so-called non-professional scientists or amateur scientists or laymen that should be involved in all phases of research projects. That is really ambitious thesis, you know, from the conceptualization to the end of results. Because usually we heard about this, that public, like laymen, should be included more about this strategic, the policy question, we know these consensus, conferences, etc. Here you have very revolutionized thesis. Can you say that it does mean that these people should be involved at the end of results as, for instance, co-authors in publications? What does it mean for the evaluation system of science, or is this really some very radical paradigm shift in science? How did you imagine? And the second one, you talked about the trends of this. I made in Slovenia, for instance, do you think you use some illustration, some new technologies, ICT, astronomy, etc.? I'm a little skeptical that it is possible to use this concept of open science or citizen science for all technologies. I made interviews with synthetic biologists in Slovenia, interviews with all, and synthetic biology is quite famous in Slovenia because of this hygiene competition and good results. What was the meaning of these people when we interviewed them concerning this do-it-yourself with synthetic biology? They said that should be probably come not so in regard to this problem, biorisk, but biosecurity problems. It's possible that state or the politics should stop these trends, which are really quite supported by I would say, very progressive oriented scientists. That's my question.
Okay. Of course, you brought up many things, and I'm thankful that you listened. Let me just say the first question: how to acknowledge their participation. Of course, when you have many collaborators, like you have already at CERN, when you do an experiment at CERN, there must be new or extended rules. How do you acknowledge participation? And I believe that in citizen science you can find rules how the participation is rewarded. And in some cases the citizens can be author or could be acknowledged. And there are experiences with that. Many citizens, in fact, refuse to be authors. They like to be acknowledged, or they, not even that. It's a misconception often. They don't have the ambition that we have. We as scientists want to show how great we are. Citizens often just want to do good work that satisfies them. But we believe with a good set of rules, citizens eventually should become authors. Now, the second point, biosecurity and so on, that has generated actually quite a number of discussions at our university. For instance, can we let citizens walk freely into labs, or should we lock them? And we...
What are the experience in Switzerland that you're academic?
Yeah, so far we have not had issues of that sort, but we are carefully going towards that. I believe that probably some of the research can never be turned into citizen science, but maybe time will tell. But at the moment we are working on regulations to whom can we give access to our high security labs. But
yeah, well, just to add to the first question, that I think one way to reward and to acknowledge the citizens is to give them back the outcomes of that research, because that's one of the problems. We made the citizens participate then, but then we lock some of the results in papers or in our repositories or things like that. And I think we as scientists, as researchers, we have to share data without expecting what they will be used for. I mean, maybe in those citizens projects, you do your results, you do your research, but if you leave the data open, maybe another citizen will use that data and make things that we didn't expect. So I think that's a way to acknowledge, and I agree with him that they are not looking to have 8 papers, impact factor, and things like that sometimes we pursue as actors.
So it's also a epistemological issue. Yeah. That is today very important problem also in natural science, the problem of repetition.
Yes, and another important thing is that there are also new ways of describing the participation of the authors in a paper and in a research. There is a project called Credit that, for instance, PLOS are beginning to use to make clear all the names that there are in papers. For instance, in CERN, that there are thousands of names, who did what. So who write the paper, who got the idea, etc., etc. And there will be a new way to assess researchers. Not just, I have a paper, no. What did you do in that paper?
Can I ask another question? Coming from the same institution as Professor Mali, and maybe I should explain just at the beginning that the Faculty of Social Science is one of the, has got a very strong and very long tradition towards the positive viewpoint towards the open access, so we are not against it, let's say so. But I cannot help myself feeling that there are more towards the challenges of citizen science that was displayed today. You briefly mentioned about the challenges, about the dangers of citizen science, and I was thinking all the time about another movement that was about started about more than 10 years ago, citizen journalism. Citizen journalism was a buzzword, and there is a strong evidence in the literature about the negative aspects of citizen journalism. So the idea behind the citizen journalism was the same: openness, transparency, democratic participation, involvement within society, it would be greater. And I think that everybody here agree on these principles for the citizen science as well. So that's not the question and that's not the problem. But alongside the challenges of the citizen science, there is, within the literature, there are, of course, some notions about the simplification of the methodology, the accuracy of data, precision of data, that kind of things. But mostly I think that we should think about the ethics, especially in the field of citizen science and social sciences. So the ethics is one of the challenges. So how do you feel about this analogy of this parallel between the citizen journalism, which I would just simply say that there are some strong negative aspects of citizen journalism, and maybe it is not adequate parallel, or maybe we should think alongside the citizen science as well. Thank you.
Okay, of course, probably you have thought more about this issue than me, and my answer will be relatively naive in your ears. Yeah, I agree that there should let me say why. They should not be put on equal footing. Public journalism, it's like you see someone being killed in the street, you immediately do something. I think they should not be put on the same side. Now, how to avoid it? That they are, that's dangerous. And my view is, with this popular embrace of citizen science by governments, by the EU, and so on, which I showed, I think they sort of go in that direction, that citizen science projects are not properly done. And my message here is not that university only can do it. I think universities should do it before it's too late. If you see, universities should occupy the position of science and say to everyone who wants to listen, we set the standards and not the citizens themselves. And we can only set the standards at the universities if we actively act on citizen science projects. That's the way that's why I am strongly for it.
Including the ethical standards.
Here is the list of the issues that we plan and want to look at. The ethical standards is a very important part. No, but I thank you very much. I haven't really thought of the journalism, but it's exactly the problem. It's the problem when activists take up a project. Scientifically, if some group wants to prove that the biodiversity next to the atomic power plant has decreased, they will definitely prove it, because they only ask people with a certain opinion. And this is, for instance, recruitment. That's an important point to have a diversity of people.
May I add something on this? When we speak about citizen science, we should not limit ourselves just about the input from scientists to science in gathering data. Citizen science is also about engagement with citizens. And one important thing which is part of citizen science is the educational side of citizen science projects, involving lay citizens and contributing to a form of their education, which may be adult education or another form of this education. And this should be seen as a return of investment from the society to science. It's an investment, and allowing the scientists, allowing the citizens to engage and to contribute to their education. It's a return of that investment, not in dollars, of course, but in education. So reducing citizen science only to gathering data, using citizens to gather data and using citizens to come with their own maybe tools, is not the right perspective. Seeing citizens, seeing also responsibility in engaging with citizens is a perspective which we recommend. I'm not speaking in the name of Dr. Daniel Wyler and Dr. Ignasi Labastida, but in the name of the paper we gave earlier this morning.
Can I put just one small question, just one detail, please, for Ignasi. What is the embargo policy at the university for green access? At the University of Barcelona?
I mean, we follow the embargo of the journals. So meaning that we put everything we can in the repository under the embargo marked by the journals. So we don't have our own embargo, because the journals mark their own embargo by the copyright transfer. But what I always say, and it's like a law that is not written anywhere, that I don't want anything in the repository closed forever. So if anything has to be in the repository, I will always put a date of opening. So in my repository there are embargoed materials, but always with a date. For instance, our transfer officer, the transfer of technology, sometimes want the code of some software program that they are trying to sell, they want it in the repository, and we put then 5 years. Our PhD theses are by a decree, a Spanish decree, must be in an institutional repository. We allow our new doctors to establish an embargo of 1 year that could be renewed another year, because there are sometimes some papers that they are still to be published. And it's all automatic. I mean, we put that, and it's all automatized. And in our repository, there is always a button to request a copy. So meaning that it can be closed, but you, as user, you have the button, and you can contact the author and say, please, can I have a copy of the thesis, of the paper, of the code, of the data? Usually the data is open always. So that's our policy. You're welcome.
Še kakšno vprašanje? More questions? Če ni, bomo zaključili. We will end it this day. And I will ask Miro, colleague Miro, to make a short maybe overview about today. And
where is my presentation? I don't have it. Okay, joke. Thank you very much to all of you who stay all the day here with us. I mean, it was a hard day, but however, I will say very short. More than 200 tweets, or best to say interactions on Facebook and Twitter, more than 120 attenders, more than 100 followers via YouTube. So we got, my impression is that we were success. So what I want to say, I want to thanks to all of you. All of you participate with contribution. Speakers with great speech, attenders with listening and with conversation with speakers, organizers with organization. Especially thanks goes absolutely to Tibi and to his enormous efforts. Yesterday he did 500 kilometers, yes? Or maybe a kilometer more. Yeah, you all, yeah, but they sleep, so you drive. So, so what I want to say is thank you to everybody, and please, my message to you is also, please send us a message, give us information, give us your request. What do we want to hear next year? To align those meetings also on the subject level. Maybe I repeat this in Slovenian language. Hvala vsem za vaš obisk, dobrodošli tudi naslednje leto, pošljite nam vaš feedback, dejansko nam ga pošljite in zadovoljstvo ga bomo upoštevali. Hvala lepa in srečno.